Okay, I think we'll get cracking. It's nearly hour, so thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. This is I think the fourth or fifth session in our series of webinars we've held this year. A little bit of a change from the usual format. We normally have a panel of speakers, but today we have one speaker. We're really looking forward to the topic. It's all about teaching tourism management using gamification. So thanks to everyone for joining. I'm Leon Lloyd. I'm the Business Development Manager with Edumundo, and I'm looking forward to hosting this session. I'm also joined by my colleague and director of the company, Milo Hendricks. And really delighted to say we have Charles Bladen from Anglia Ruskin University here as well. So Charles is Senior Lecturer and author of Events Management and Introduction, which I believe, Charles will correct me, I'm sure if I'm wrong, but I believe there's a new edition coming out fairly soon, and we'll be talking a little bit about that, especially one of the chapters in particular, which talks a lot about things which are relevant to today's topic. So looking forward to getting into this. And once again, thanks for everyone for joining. So just to let you know a little bit about the format of the session. Well, as I've said, I'm Leon Lloyd, I'm hosting the session. Milo Hendricks, my colleague, is supporting with this as well, and we'll be managing the chat box. We will be recording today's session, right? So please be aware of that. I imagine most of your cameras are already sort of muted, as your microphones are as well. That's fine. We're spotlighting the speakers, so for the recording. But of course, if you ask a question in the chat or if you raise your hand, that's absolutely fine. We'll try to unmute you to ask your question, to Charles or to us. So that's fine. If you have more questions after the session, well, more than welcome to reply to one of the webinar related emails, which I'm sure you've got from my colleague Callum, or you can respond directly to me at leon.l@edumundo.co.uk. So the format of the session in terms of the agenda, well, we're going to have a quick word about Edumundo just to give a bit of background and a bit of context to who we are and what we do. And then hopefully, if we're on time, about 10 past, we'll go straight in then to a discussion with our guest speaker, Charles Bladen. We'll be looking at some of these topics. So for example, of course, experiential learning, but specifically around the reflection and action model by Donald Shon. And we're talking about how simulations feature in module assessment. So also around skills, of course, really important topic, which we often talk about when we're talking about simulations. We'll be going in towards the end. Actually, we've got an overview of the tour operator as well. So we've sort of allowed about 10 minutes towards the end for anyone who's not familiar with the tour operator simulation. It'll give you just a chance to get a very high level sort of quick view of the simulation. So that'll hopefully be useful for those who are interested. We'll leave 5 minutes as well for a bit of closing remarks at the end, and hopefully finish on time at 3. So very quickly, just about Edumundo. Well, we've been going since 2001, so it's our 20th year of operations actually as a company of developing management simulations, which we have quite a wide portfolio of now, serving business schools all across the world. We have nearly 40 employees, most of whom based at our headquarters in The Hague in the Netherlands, but some of whom are also in the UK as well. We work with the private sector as well as universities, although universities, so higher education is the core focus of what we do, but we also support corporates with their talent sort of retention and talent acquisition programs, but also their leadership development programs as well. So as you can imagine, we serve quite a number of students each year. Some key points about our management simulations, and again, hopefully this is useful just for a bit of context. They're all web-based. They all work on any device, so there's no software to install or anything like that. Typically, we'll put students into teams of 4 or 5 in a team, and students will take over a company. They will manage that fictitious company through a series of rounds, where one round usually equates to 1 year of operations. From a time investment point of view, well, it's very flexible, and we can align well with a module outline, so we can have a very intensive delivery for like an open day or an induction event, but typically our modules will sit alongside, so embed within a module where a round is played within a week of study across a semester. They're highly competitive, and so teams are not just competing against a computer here, but they're directly competing against the other teams on the same module. So that makes it highly competitive. If one team, for example, gains a lot of market share, then of course they take that directly from their competitors. So of course it makes it fun, it makes it exciting, and then that obviously spurs on the learning process as well. We cater for all student levels, so right from level 3 foundation right through to level 7 MSc and MBA. Highly flexible, and although some of our simulations are sort of marked as a specific level, we can often tailor them further to make them perhaps less complex and suitable for a lower year, or more complex by adding certain scenarios or events happening within simulations too. So just a little bit on why management simulations. Well, typically we hear from students and from lecturers that student engagement improves, and I will be talking about specifically about how this relates to Charles's module as well at Anglia Ruskin later. But simulations also really enhance the learning experience. It provides a meaningful learning experience, and of course an opportunity for students to apply that theoretical knowledge. We typically see really strong links with student satisfaction, and where it's used in perhaps the third year of undergraduate study, so level 6, often real positive links to the NSS. Improves employability skills, of course, so this is one of the real big outputs aside from the knowledge acquisition and the ability to apply those theoretical frameworks. It's around students communicating with each other and developing those skills. Just lastly on this point, just to say in terms of our simulation portfolio, you may already be aware, but we have a range of management simulations covering most business subjects within the business school. So covering a number of levels as well. And as I've said, we can tailor each simulation to make it more or less advanced depending on the level too. So that's a little bit of an overview in terms of the simulations. I'm going to now stop sharing, and I'm going to welcome our guest, Charles. You're unmuted. You're muted currently. There you are.
Good. Thank you very much, Leon. Thank you. Good to be here. It's an honor and a privilege to share some of our experiences with education and with you guys, and then with fellow academics and people who are interested in learning.
Well, that's what it's all about. We want to have these sessions because we feel like it's really sort of good to get to sort of share that feedback between the academic community. And we've heard from some of the previous webinars that lots of people really value these sessions. So I know you've got a lot to say about experiential learning, and actually somewhat of a bit of a well, I suppose these are my words rather than yours, but a bit of an expert, I would say, in this field. And you've been using simulations for some years, is that right?
That's right. So I started working with simulations with some colleagues in Switzerland in 1997, 98, and I've carried on, obviously until now. And
yeah, well, did you? So we're going to talk about a few things, but I think in terms of our agenda, we had about 4 or 5 different sort of main blocks of things we were going to discuss. And I know one of them, I think the sort of main block was around this whole reflection in action model.
Right.
So perhaps we'll just go straight in to talk about that, because I know this is something that you feel quite strongly about. So I suppose I'm interested to know really about how this relates specifically to events management, but also, to thinking about the type of students that you're dealing with. But I mean, tell us a little bit about reflection in action, and also maybe Donald Sean a little bit as well.
Brilliant. Well, I was doing my doctoral studies at the University of Greenwich with Professor Jill Jameson, and in her module we talked about professionalism in education, and one of the issues was we came across this reflection in action reflective practitioner model from Donald Shun, and it just lit the whole thing up. I mean, obviously at that point, and still have, I've got 2 postgrads already in education and have been teaching for many years. But what struck me was that whilst the goal of everything we do, we're still talking about it today, is this idea of flipped class, student-led learning, student-centered learning. which even in the mid-90s, when I was doing my first teaching qualification, we were talking about, we want students to lead their own learning. When we're teaching, we want student-centered learning, etc. And of course, we've got many modern methods such as flipped class and those kinds of things, which I'm sure everybody here has heard of. My experience was, it was one thing talking about it, but it was another thing getting it to happen in the classroom with the students. And I've always been quite convinced that there was a great difference between teaching and learning, and that I could be teaching and the students could be learning absolutely nothing. And then eventually, I came across the Edmundo tour operator simulation, as you've just been talking about, and it all kind of seemed to fit into place somehow. And all of a sudden, there was an institution like ARU London that was willing to kind of almost take the risk, rather than just spending money on another resource, on a better textbook or a better guest speaker, and trying to keep that. It was almost adopting a new way of learning. And I remembered from working with colleagues in the 90s and later, that basically what I wanted students to do was to take charge of their own learning without foregoing any responsibility on my part. As an institution, we have to deliver the contracted course, etc. And so this wonderful model that we have with Donald Schoen, the reflective practitioner, which is reflection in action as opposed to school knowledge. I realized a lot of our courses, what we were doing was we were delivering theory either from books or from PowerPoint presentations and whatever. And the result was students were learning it, and they were their ability to regurgitate it was being evaluated through various forms, such as presentations or written forms. And we changed the theatre. We changed the trappings on the stage that we were using to try to make it more progressive, less intimidating for students, less exam-based, for example, while still trying to measure students' learning and whether or not they'd achieved the outcomes. And it wasn't until we looked at reflection in action and the idea that Donald Schoen had of what professionals think about while they're doing it. This idea of, rather than, okay, you go to university, you learn some stuff from books. I'm a book writer, and I can tell you, I like writing books. I think books are really useful, and I think they're a really good way of conveying theory and applying it to living cases, or cases that aren't necessarily living, but they're good experienced people, and that's a good method. That's one method. But to actually give a tour operator business to students and say, okay, you're not doing your degree and then graduating and then going off and working your way up the chain to kind of becoming somebody who bears responsibility without having had responsibility. What we're going to give to you is a simulated business. So this business lives and this business responds, and it's your business. It's not my business.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
You know more about your business than I know about mine. Of course, you don't know anything right now, but basically over the next 8 weeks or simulated 8 years, you and your group, which I don't want to torture students, actually, believe it or not. So I let them choose their own classmates, and they're very often classmates that they've worked with. But groups of 4, ideally no more than 5. And what we do is we just make as many groups as we need to with the groups. Currently, this trimester, we're running 2 separate groups. So I teach one, and my colleague teaches the other, and he's had to come on board and learn how to do this and how to work. And what we do is we basically put them together in groups, and we run a 2-session, 3 hours, 6 hours in total per week, 3 hours as a kind of lecture, kind of workshop thing. And then the workshop, the real workshop, takes place in what we used to call a tutorial, which is now a 3-hour, it's changed from seminar. Now it's just basically a practice session where they get together very often what I do is I will do a sort of, I'll ask them if they've got any questions, right? These questions will bubble up. Sometimes they'll ask me and I'll say, okay, leave that for the session on Wednesday. And when we get together, we'll address this. So it might be, they don't ask how do market segments work, because these are level 5 students. So they've already studied market segments and they understand what they're doing there. They understand the theory behind it. But what I do is I reinforce that theory, and then we talk about it in practice in relation to all their business. So I'll say, you know, here you've got 3 main target markets. You know, you've got your business, you've got your backpackers, you've got your families.
Well, this is really important because actually, you know, you mentioned earlier about the flipped classroom, but actually now you're talking about specifically how you deliver it in terms of the sessions, the workshops, the lectures. Well, this is all linked, isn't it? And I think the reflection in action, whilst it's something different to flipped classroom per se, that there's sort of overlaps, right? So when I think of flipped classroom, I'm thinking, well, actually a move away from the sort of traditional didactic dissemination of information from the lecturer to the students, and then the students going off and considering that and sort of revising that and learning it in more detail. Well, actually the flipped classroom model is sort of really turning it on its head and saying, well, do some of that initial what would have been the dissemination of the information in advance, and then come to the session. And instead of that session being a didactic traditional format, it's actually much more sort of useful time spent between, you know, the students and their peers, but also the students and the lecturer being the sort of facilitator of the session as well, right? So actually, so that's flipped classroom. But then the reflection and action, I suppose, is extending that further to being, regardless of where and when, it's really in everything the students are doing. It's getting them to be learning with their teammates, with their peers, but also learning for themselves. So this self-directed thing, and considering everything that they're doing and sort of learning from it, right?
Yeah. So they're learning from each other. They're teaching each other. They're learning from each other. They're sharing ideas. So they're learning without realizing it to manage groups, lead groups, working groups, which is really important in hospitality, tourism, and events. And they are coming, like you say, prepared, Leon. You know, so they're bringing the goods to the class, and I'm responding to them. It's not even turning it on its head. It's almost a different way of learning. So it's not, I'm introducing a topic, using some illustrations, and they're kind of learning it and then running away and applying it to their assessment. It's actually becomes a completely different dynamic. Now, once they're over that phase of like, what, you know, like, I don't know this new alien landscape, and I try and show them that no, actually, really, it's the same as everything that you've been doing, but this is your business. You do it, you learn from it. And then I build around this trimester, we're running a practical presentation where it's a little bit like I'm kind of like the client, and what they're doing is they're giving me an update really of how the business is running, what their general strategic approach is. So we look at application of things like differentiation, things like competence, target market segments. Obviously, you've got within there your needs, wants, and demands, and all that. Then you've got your marketing mix of your seven P's, and how that's kind of working together to deliver something, which is then evaluated using the financial data at the end of every period. So every week they do a year, we roll it on Friday afternoon. We were rolling it on a Monday, but the problem was that the students were actually working too hard on it over the weekend.
Well, that's a good position to be in, though, right? Isn't it? Rather than the other way around.
It's completely unknown to me. You know, the idea that students are getting so excited, not really just with competition. I know you mentioned the competition before, and there is that. And every Monday, my first class, on a Monday morning at 10 o'clock in tourism management is I come and I pull up the email that I get from you guys, Edmundo, with the scores on the doors. And we go through it and I show them and I say, congratulations, first place is, you know, and they're waiting to see, are they first? Are they in the top 3? And then we've got a different breakdown, just profit related. And it's quite interesting how using the dashboard that the simulation shows at the end of each period, each year, it shows the balanced scorecard, and then basically what they're able to do is look at where the business is performing well, which is often not just profit. The better they're doing on profit, they're often neglecting other aspects of the business, which will harm their productivity and their sustainability long term, you know, over the 8-year period. Yeah, it's just great. It's just they're coming with questions, and I'm saying, you know, how are you getting on? I survey them. I do ask them to do little Survey Monkey questionnaires, you know, and the vast majority say, in fact, you know, 99% of students say this is better than a normal class, right? You know, this idea of, you know, education is something we get through in order to get the job we want after we've got the degree, so we can, you know, get in there and we can be employable. That's not what we're doing. So coupling it together with the employability program that we have here at ARU, which is really quite special, and also the sort of support structure that we have from all the other support services within the university, I think that this enables them to basically get on with something that they're really interested in and really enthusiastic about. And they're using that Sean thing where they're saying, okay, what are we doing? What are we intending to do here? How are we going to go about that? The staff aren't satisfied, according to the balanced scorecard. What do we do? And they have a go at it. And then maybe they ask me, and I said, well, you know, when you do a job, what makes you satisfied about it? You know, and we break it down into tasks, and we break it down into pay and benefits, length of service, employee loyalty, number of customers to number of staff, and all this kind of stuff. And they're going, yeah, okay, I get it.
The important thing is that they're having to think for themselves, yeah. Right? So when they come to you, so this is the self-directed thing you were speaking about, isn't it? Yeah. So rather than there simply being a right or wrong answer, it's not as rigid as that, right? It's actually, there's a bit more sort of freedom to interpret and come up with their own decision on, or you know, their own interpretation of what right looks like to them. And actually the balanced scorecard, I suppose, allows that to happen in more detail as well, because actually that, as you say, it's not just those clear financial metrics that they're being measured on, but it's also those non-financials as well. But I'm interested to know, because we have talked, I know, a bit about this whole self-directedness, or self-directed learning and peer-based learning. And I know, you know, so what's your take on how students respond to that initially? Because it must be taking them out of their comfort zone when it's a different approach to what they're used to in their other modules potentially. So how do you balance that?
Well, I have one session in. So what happens is you guys run the induction to the system in week 2, in my week. So week 1 they arrive. Hi, welcome. Week 2 induction. Week 3 is year 1, and so it's at the end of the induction. So you have the induction, and then they have that realization, wow, we've got business, wow, we need to get together, what we're going to do. And so really it's all about kind of coaching, a little bit of hand holding, to the point where you're saying, but actually, you know, don't worry, you've got 8 years here, so play around with it. What I would do, and Heiss came from Edmundo last time, and he's coming this week actually as well, because he has a follow-up. And what the speech he gave, I listened quite carefully this time. I mean, I always do, obviously, but this time I really listened. And he said, pick a strategy and stick to it. And how often do we teach that? You know, how often do we recite Porter saying, you know, don't just go budget, low cost, or go differentiation, but choose, charge high prices, and then basically look at your target markets, do your advertising accordingly. pick a strategy and stick to it, don't flip-flop. And basically what happened this time was they have that minute or two, and then because of the post-COVID situation, we still have one or two students, or maybe slightly more, who are Zooming in, and we have the vast majority in the classroom. And so what's happening is that you start slowly to hear that group at the back take control and start to do it and start to work together. And then the other groups start to, okay, that's what they're doing. And they start to get up, and it becomes this momentum. So they get over the fear and they get into the practice, and then you're all right. And you kind of, every time you think, are they going to do it? Are they going to do it? And then, they did it again. And that self-directed activity, you're doing so many things that I'm not doing anything. I'm just basically mentoring or coaching, depending on what's needed. I get involved sometimes with, if there are group problems, if there's maybe a problem with somebody because they're ill or whatever and they haven't been attending. And sometimes I get involved with the group. I don't get involved really with the person, just make sure they're okay. And they sort out their own group problems just as they would in the workplace.
That's another thing, actually, isn't it? That will lead us on to talk about skills in a bit as well, which will be good. But no, that's really interesting. I really relate to what you're saying about. So for those listening, by the way, Gijs is our operations manager who does the support sessions, the introduction presentations to the students, and then Q&A session after 1 or 2 rounds. But yeah, I mean, that thing about the sticking with your strategy and just keeping to that path, I suppose I can relate to that a little bit. I mean, okay, maybe pivoting is okay sometimes, but the important thing is whatever strategy you've chosen, it's not necessarily that there's a right or wrong strategy. It's just that the decisions that you take, the tactical actions you take, should really reflect the strategic direction that you've already agreed with your teammates that you want to go in. So that's the important thing, that you're sort of living by your by what you say, sort of thing, isn't it, really, in action?
Yeah, and the thing is, just because you don't get what you want, maybe you need to do more of it. So that the whole Sean model comes about through that reflection in action. So you're actually breaking it down, looking at each aspect of the balanced scorecard and saying, okay, these are the areas that need to be addressed in the. So red is urgent, medium is a disaster waiting to happen in the longer term, and then green is something that you're doing really well. But you kind of need to keep on doing that. What you don't need to do is just because something's red, start flip-flopping your advertising strategy or your market position just because you didn't get what you want. You basically have to sit down and kind of say, no, we're still going on, like you do in business. Sometimes you do change strategy, you do change market position, but that's probably your last resort. What you need to do is to keep kind of figuring out how these things connect together. And some of them are system related, so they can access help 24/7 on the help desk. So they send a quick message on the Edmundo help desk and they get a reply. That's great for me because I don't want to worry about the program side of it, because that's not really my expertise. And then on the other hand, if they need help with the business theory and how to apply it, that's my thing. I'm the tourism specialist or whatever. And then also, in addition to that, Gijs, who was there at as you said, can come. He's coming mid-session. So we've got this week, week 5. So I expect to see him. I imagine we've arranged to see him tomorrow. So he'll be popping in, and he goes 10 minutes around each group. So those guys in the classroom, what they've done is they've accessed using the laptop. They go in the breakout rooms on Zoom, and then Gijs goes around and visits them all. And I don't know. I mean, I sit in on what he's saying, and it's great. It's a good session, and it's technically perfect, etc. But the delight that they have about kind of this VIP guest that came in, and it's, in a sense, it's theatre, but it helps them. It makes them feel taken care of. And it makes them feel like their achievement is related to their amount of work and their ability.
Right.
You know,
Right.
rather than it's kind of this game that we don't really understand how it works, not doing very well at it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. So my take on that would be that, you know, I talk to a lot of lecturers, academics, of course, who are interested in, you know, implementing more experiential learning in their teaching and learning. And of course, it's something that I think really, it seems to us, has moved away now from being what was at once perhaps considered a niche area, to something that's more towards the mainstream now. But still, I think there's a lot of resistance from some lecturers with the feeling that, well, it's a new system to learn, and that can be problematic because obviously everyone's busy and there's enough responsibilities. But knowing that we do everything, you know, we come in, we sit with the students, we answer their questions, we've got this help desk and all that. I think it's that knowing that there's that. Taking away that burden of responsibility is really alleviates the pressure.
I think, Leon, sorry to interrupt. I think it does go back to that old, sort of, no disrespect, but it goes back to that old way of thinking, which is I am the font of all knowledge and the expert at the front of the room. And if I don't know, there's going to be a problem here. Whereas actually, once it's transferred over in terms of responsibility and activity to the students, and once they take that on board willingly, then really we're not on the stage with a guide from the side, and we're sort of there helping them. And I think that's the same with the system. It doesn't rest on my shoulders. What I need to do is take care of what they need to be doing in which week. So I had to sit down and think a little bit for 10 or 15 minutes the first time we ran it. Now it's a case of ticking over, because we run this three trimesters a year, you know, because we have it running in the summer as well. And so what's happening is that all I'm doing is firing off an adapted email. I don't tell him, but I copy and paste the same email every term to Gijs and basically just change the dates. And I find the more specific I can make the dates and say, we'll have decision year 1 here, induction here. And for us, with a 12-week trimester, it's always the same number of weeks. So he's coming in induction week 2, first lot of decisions week 3, and then basically we've got the assignment he visits again in week 5. We've got the assignment in week 8, and it's progress. You know, at the end of the day, it's really very little. Yeah, we could at the end of it give a cop out to the winners. We could do that, but actually the students are not so interested in winning. It is a competition and they do take that on board, but actually the real value of what comes back in our surveys is that they're getting a chance to have a simulated experience which they're learning from, rather than it all being in theory now tested and then maybe I might or might not apply it later, or maybe it'll be out of date by the time we get there.
Well, that's what we want, isn't it? That we want both the students to be engaged and to sort of, you know, jump on board that sort of competitive spirit of wanting to win, but at the same time recognizing ideally that, you know, even if they don't win, that's you know, the winning isn't really what's important. The important thing is the learning that they're getting from it. But I think it's that desire to win and that competitiveness that makes it engaging in the first place, and makes it more fun.
And the confidence that they get from being successful at something they didn't know anything about to start with.
Charles, talk me through this these ways of thinking, because I know we're jumping between a few things now. We've covered so much great stuff, and there's still quite a lot more to cover, but a couple of slides to show. So this is something that's quite integral to this Donald Shon model, right?
It is. It comes really from De Bono, Edouard De Bono, the teaching thinking guy, the guy who first coined the phrase lateral thinking. And anybody that's involved in any kind of strategy teaching or strategy formulation will know that basically the problem with education, business education, is, you know, I can talk about Steve Jobs and what a great guy he was and what a great idea he had in his garage, but at the end of the day, that isn't going to work today, right? What the problem we have is, from the disciplines like marketing, like finance, is that really it's all anecdotal. So the education has always been anecdotal, Whereas by looking at this and realizing that the problem with strategy and running a business is it's all in the future, which is what we're really interested in and what we get paid the big bucks for managing. At the end of the day, the focus with the students is not to build up knowledge of the past. That might help them a little bit with the future, but reality is to try to work with them and get them to recognize different ways of thinking. And so here, what I found was that different types of students, if you like, on different degrees, they majored in one area or another. And actually, mainly, the finance students were very analytical. So they were able to look at what was there and look at a bunch of figures and be able to tell you perhaps deduce logically some patterns behind it. Whereas logic or process thinking, where basically you do, 2 add 2 should equal 4. And sometimes it doesn't, but there's a reason why. And it's trying to kind of, and we never leave that. But these are really the 2 main domains. But when I had the joy of teaching creative industry students a few years ago, they were all lateral. They were like all really creative, and they could give you a fashion line, and they could give you something that you'd never seen before. And they could do that. The problem was very often that they had problems marketing it, because they couldn't logically apply the structure. And so with them, we had to move away from that creative thematic, not connected. And we do, we used to call it brainstorming. We tend to call it quick thinking now, which is a useful group exercise in itself to generate creative alternatives. But basically, we can do that in the classroom. And I've enjoyed reading De Bono a long time ago on a train or something and thinking, yeah, I can use this in class, and bringing this model and actually creating warm-up sessions for groups so that they can, so let's do an analytical exercise. Here's some figures, fixed cost, variable costs are different, same turnover, what business would you choose and why, and that's an analytical process. A logical process is the steps that you would take to get from A to B. What would you do? And understanding what you can use, recognizing it almost as a feeling, as a way of thinking, and then comparing that to lateral. So an exercise I did yesterday with the groups was I put a paper clip on the board, a picture of a paper clip, and then I said, right, you've got 1 minute to come up with as many uses for this paper clip as you possibly can. And they, went off, great group work and everything. And you can actually illustrate how a paper clip can be used for clipping, obviously, but it can be used for poking, it can be used to conduct electricity, conduct heat. There's lots of kind of different thematic ideas emerge that don't actually occur to you at first, because you're stuck in that logical way of thinking of what you think a paper clip's for. And then we go, right, now let's look at your results, right? How can you improve on this? What tools are available to you? Get creative, get analytical, then get logical, and then apply it to the business. And in the end, if our students, rather than the students still carrying on and on and on, just being analytical, which is considered by many to be enough, right? Actually, to have them literally be able to stop one type of thinking and go to another system of thinking, and then to be able to kind of combine them together. I think tourism policy and tourism management ideas and theories will change over the next 20 years, but the ability to use almost philosophical systems of thought as required, as almost tools in a toolbox, I think is incredible. And that's something that the business simulation allows you to do.
Well, I know you, yeah, you mentioned, so yeah, of course, critical reasoning skills are important for any student, but actually I think you mentioned as well before that when we were talking about events management students in particular, perhaps tourism students as well, being perhaps, there being perhaps a clearer link, or needing to have a clearer link between the accomplishment of specific business outcomes. And that's why, that's why this is so important. But I suppose just jumping on from that as well, and thinking about this reflective Practicum. Let's share this other slide now as well, because I know you've spoken a little bit about that, but just maybe to go into a bit more detail on that.
All right. So the idea, it's interesting because I got thinking about this because I was putting the slide together for today, but the idea really is what we're doing now. I think that's what we're doing. I got a lot actually from the conversation we had last week, because we were talking with some of you Edmundo guys, and again, that idea of not being the sage on the stage, but the guy from the side. In other words, really what we want at the end of the day today is hopefully a conversation and a sharing of ideas. And then really we can become a sort of functioning, learning, sharing community. And that's what Sean, I believe, meant by the term, the reflective practicum. So the reflective practicum is about a learning community, you know, and this has been applied later, more recently, but we have learning communities all the time. You know, we have them on LinkedIn. This is another one here today where we're talking about, okay, how can we use gamification? How can we use games? You don't hear me refer to it very much as a game because I want everyone to take it very seriously, indeed. But the fact is, it's a game, and that's why they end up using it, and then they're learning from it, and then they're sharing within their groups. The groups are sharing within the community that we've got within the kind of learning space. And then what we're doing is learning various things. I'll be honest, I don't know, you know, some of the things I've asked and said to your company, can you do this? Like, could you come, could Heis come in the middle of the term and kind of be a sounding board for these guys? And you've gone, yeah, no problem. And he just comes along for an hour, and that's an hour I appreciate. But actually, he's sharing what he knows. I'm sharing what I need with you guys. You're delivering it. So every term, in a sense, we're becoming the reflective simulation gamification practicum, because we're sharing best practice. You know, and I mean, I can tell you, I don't think this is going to work as well if you make it in groups of 6 or 7 or 8, because my experience will tell me that 1 or 2 of those people are not going to do enough. They're not going to do enough work. It's not going to be equally shared. My assignment is structured around 4 or 5 actions that they need to perform within that, and they can all take one each, or they could share it, or whatever, as long as there's equal contribution. And
well, let's talk a bit about assessment then. So you mentioned the assignment there. Perhaps that's a good point then, just to mention quickly, because I think when I talk to a lot of academics who are new to simulations, who perhaps haven't used simulations, sometimes there's this feeling that the simulation itself should sort of spit out the results in terms of the mark that the students should ultimately come away from. But I mean, how do you approach assessment with this module?
I think it's a platform like anything else. I mean, it's not like any other platform, but I think we use platforms. So, for example, in the classroom, you'll give them a case study and let them work on that. What you're really looking for is the outcome, right? And the outcome is the learning. And then the learning somehow needs to be evidenced. And so I think we get that mixed up a lot in higher education. I think we're doing a pretty good job here, but I've had experiences in the past where we're all a bit confused, and it all seems to be resting on the test at the end, and the students are thinking about what's in the test, and they're thinking about how to crack the test, and it all becomes a little bit dysfunctional, because the baby we threw out a long time ago with the learning bathwater was the actual learning. You know, we haven't actually learned anything. We cracked it. We got the assignment. I got the grade. I can go on to the next year. And what happens here is that we're able to evidence. So literally, it's instead of it's like there's going to be a test and you're going to be in judgment, I'll be the judge, and then we'll see how we go from there. It isn't like that anymore. What we do is we say, right, tell us about your business, and we can do that on Zoom, and they're not killing it. It's not PowerPoint poisoning. They're not giving us a 25 PowerPoint slide presentation like we normally get and reading off the slides to us. What they're doing is they're saying, this is what we've been doing. This is how it works. These are the problems that we've had. And so we start to try to put into words the way I've used the Donald Schoen model is to try to explain, in a sense, or try to help people to understand how to model design thinking and design sharing in the reflective, creative practicum. Because what we try to do is we try to do something, and then we try to explain what we're doing, when in fact these are two completely different things. Like the difference between love and poetry, they're actually completely different things. And so it's what this helps us to do is use the simulation as the reflective system that we're using to be able to kind of put these ideas. And then what we're doing is we're having a conversation, and then we're trying to help them to put this into words. And this helps all sorts of things. This helps neurodiverse students. You know, what we're doing is we're looking at a result. What we're not saying is if you don't run your business right, you're not going to win and you're going to get a bad grade. I can't think of a worse way of using this. I'm sure somebody somewhere will think of this. Some administrator somewhere will come up with a bright idea of trying to do that. But the truth is, if we're really concerned with education and learning, it's all about what they think, and they'll come to conclusions. They like doing that. We know that. They like being called customers and stuff. So the thing is that they like saying, oh yeah, this is what I mean, we can make it all Instagram if you want and have them sharing their feelings about it. But at the end of the day, you can say, yeah, okay, why is your profit so high and yet your customer satisfaction so low? What do you think's happening here? And we can kind of break it back down, and you can deconstruct it into those chunks, right? And that's what the assignment's about. Now they have a written assignment, which is about the syllabus. So to counter any idea that, you know, your students aren't learning tourism management, they're just playing with games. Actually, they're not. But what we've tried to do is to take the heat off of it by not giving them too much to do all at once. We've spread it out a bit.
No, absolutely.
We're less interested in where they get to. We're more interested in the journey.
Well, this is really great, Charles, and I think we could go on talking about this for quite a while. Certainly interesting topics, and I suppose we're going to go on in a second now for Milo to do the demonstration as well. But just quickly, because I did want to devote a bit of time to just talking about skills and just really stressing that. I know we've sort of mentioned it a little bit as we've been talking, but like for me, students working in teams within the simulation and really getting an opportunity to sort of apply their theory whilst, you know, persuading with each other what their chosen strategy, negotiating with each other, and then sort of working, you know, especially on teams, you know, working in remote teams, it's all sort of simulating what they'll be doing in their real world of work as well. But I just wondered what your thoughts are on like the employability agenda and how this really supports it, and perhaps what you think the most important skills are that really come out of their experience.
I mean, like I mentioned before, we have a big employability initiative here at the campus, at the university, and basically, obviously, we've had soft skills. So you've your traditional hard business management skills, into the areas of marketing, HR, and finance, and marketing, and all the other areas. Obviously, all culminating in strategy overall. They have to do it all, but I would say that they benefit from decision making, working in teams, leadership, conflict resolution, communication, you know, all the other things that are the good stuff. And I think that building up confidence through success, you know, you press this lever, that happens. I did that. Nobody else told me to do that. We worked out that we should do that over a period of time. I can do this, and that for me is the biggest. These are all outcomes, right?
No, that's great, Charles. And it was just interesting to hear your take on that. And I know we've heard from others as well who really actually like to encourage the students to sort of stress those experiences on their CVs and in job interviews when they go for work as graduates as well. And something we also do, which we're now built into a core part of our offering, is issuing these certificates now for all students on completion of the simulation, because again, it's something that they can directly post up on their LinkedIn profiles and make that a featured part of their LinkedIn profiles to show that they've gained those experiences. So great stuff. Well, Charles, really delighted to hear your thoughts on some of those topics. And I'm going to pass over to Milo now, a little bit later than planned. Sorry, Milo, but hopefully we'll just have a couple of minutes to wrap up at the end as well.
Sure. Okay. So what I'll do then, well, hi everyone, my name is Milo Hendricks, director of the company. Looking forward to demonstrating the tourism management simulation to you in just a couple of minutes, just a sneak preview. If you're interested, please feel free to contact one of us and you get a full demonstration, of course. So let me share my screen. So what you see here is a website, and I've been logged in as one of the students, as a student team. And as we said before, the students are divided into teams of about 4, could be 5, 3 students, and every student is managing their own online tour operator, sort of Expedia-like tour operator. And it's a highly competitive setting, meaning that one team's decision will really influence the other team's market shares and results in demand. So it's not fun. They really have to fight over market share here, which is obviously a very engaging part of the learning experience, so to say. The simulation I'm going to show has already been played, but what you see here is, for example, the decision section where you can find all different destinations where they can do business in. But before they decide on where to enter and what kind of market segments to focus on, they obviously first have to do an analysis. And the analysis part consists of, for example, externally, there's news items. So every round they play stands for 1 year of operations. And every round there's new news items telling them what's happening in all the locations where they can do business with. So there could be news about polluted seawater, or there's a wolf on the loose in the Swiss mountains, or there's all kinds of things happening in the world which will influence the demand, for example, for a certain segment in a certain area. More analysis can be done in the results section, where they can find some internal analysis. They can do some, for example, the financial sheets here, balance sheet, income statements, but also external. They can, for example, go to the market shares to compare their market share to all their different competitors, which are the other student teams in the different markets. There's also the balanced scorecard here for them to analyze. And this is one of the most important results, I would say, because this determines their place in the leaderboard, in the ranking list. So it's important to them, is what we always explain to them, that it's not only a short-term focus where you only focus, for example, on profit or on turnover. But if you want to be successful in the long term, you need all these indicators, also your market share, your image, your employee satisfaction, etc., in the green, to score most of the points on the long term. So after the analysis, we ask them to come up with a certain strategy. And the strategic part of this management simulation, you find it over here on the left side. You see all different strategic options. There's even a couple more. It's highly flexible. So every university or module leader we work with chooses themselves what kind of strategies and analysis tools they'd like their students to use. For example, in the first round, we could ask them to work on their mission and their vision. Maybe afterwards do a SWOT analysis, think about the Porter generic strategies, maybe a PESTEL or 5 forces. There's a whole lot of usual suspects over there. Then, so we've seen the analysis, then there's a strategic focus, and afterwards, of course, they have to sort of bring that strategy into practice. So in the decision section, they can take operational, tactical actions, operational decisions for a whole bunch of departments. First one is the purchasing department, where they can create allotment deals with hotel chains all over the world. So let's say we take a quick look at some destinations in Italy. Let's say Lazio. And in Lazio, there's a couple of hotels, a 2-star, a 3-star, even a 5-star. Let's say we are interested in sort of the higher quality, high price segment in the market. So let's see what Garda, the 5-star hotel, has to offer. Well, stunning picture at least. Some introduction text, some hotel and room facilities. Students can come up with some sort of a deal to purchase a number of beds for a certain amount. They can make decisions about transportation, about how to deal with complaints, maybe some extra marketing intention for this specific hotel package. And last but not least, of course, there are pricing schedules. So what are we going to ask in the different seasons, and what kind of last minute discounts would we like to offer? So these kind of decisions will be taken for all the hotels they do business with, and all the other decisions are, for example, about updating their website, investing in local representatives and their tasks. So, for example, do they have to organize trips or collect the travelers from the airport? All those kind of things. There's some decisions to take about promotion, of course, banners, e-brochures, some loans perhaps to pay it back. So there's a whole bunch of decisions for them to think about. Once they've taken all these decisions, then the deadline is there, probably once a week, as Charles said, often on a Friday, but that's flexible. The simulation starts calculating, and that only takes a couple of minutes, maybe 1 or 2 minutes, and then the new results pop up. So then after that, they will see an update of all their financials and the market shares, etc. A new balanced scorecard as well, new news items, and very important, of course, new ranking list as well, where you can find all the students' own chosen company names, the points they've scored, and the change in compared to the previous round. Same as almost a real stock exchange, of course. So this is in a really quick nutshell how the simulation works. As I said, if you have more questions about it, Lee and I, or any of us, we're very happy to schedule a meeting with you, of course, and demonstrate in more depth.
That's great. Thank you, Milo, for that. That's really helpful. And I'm sure to all the attendees as well, just to give you a little bit of a snapshot on what the simulation looks like. Of course, that's just a very high level overview. You know, it's really good to spend a sort of good 20 minutes, half an hour, just looking in detail at the simulation if you want to get a good understanding of how it works. So yeah, so we're drawing to a close now. It's 3 o'clock exactly, but let's just have some sort of final remarks, really. Charles, it's been great chatting with you today. Thank you so much for your input. I wanted to say as well that you gave me a sneak peek, actually, of that chapter from your forthcoming book. Do you want to just mention a little bit about your forthcoming book, the new edition?
Thanks very much. Yeah, the 3rd edition of Events Management and Introduction by I and James Cannell, Nick Wilde, and Emma Abson will be published probably around about March, I think, by Routledge, and it's all looking good. You know, we enjoy doing this. It's a great piece of work. Thanks for your support with that. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, well, I'm sure it'll be really a lot of interest to a lot of the participants today, because it's directly in relation to these specific subjects, right? So that's important. But we really appreciate your time today. And well, actually, I think there's probably a whole other session to carry on the conversation, because there's been so much I think we were hoping to cover that maybe the time always goes quicker than you think, doesn't it? But no, really good to spend some time talking through these topics. What I'll do just to finish up is just to share this slide here and to say to all our participants, we really appreciate your support as well. Thanks so much for coming today. I hope that's been useful. We'd really welcome your feedback on today's session, how you found it, if there was anything in particular that was, that drew your attention to, anything that was of particular interest. We'd be delighted to carry on the conversation in more detail and talk about simulations. Of course, that's what we're interested in doing. So feel free to contact any of us. Of course, you've probably got my colleague Callum's details, who sent out some marketing communications with you. But my details are here as well. So it's leon.l@edumundo.co.uk. I think that's it. I think, thank you so much for coming, everyone. And please look out for our next one. Thank you so much.
Cheers.